All right, so the painting in this video was actually painted several months ago when I was preparing for my show at Studio Gallery. There's a link down below if you want to see images from that show. It runs through November 2nd, 2020. But anyway, so this was painted in preparation for that show, and I knew there was going to be challenges with this painting, and but I decided to film it anyway, and I did run into challenges, and so I kind of abandoned the video process at the end, towards the end of the painting. However, this painting turned out to be the first one to sell in my show. And I ended up really liking the final product, so I decided to edit the footage, and here we go. All right, so today I'm going to be working on a 14 by 28 inch panorama alla prima oil painting of a railroad crossing out in the Mojave Desert. And to be honest, this painting is causing a little bit of anxiety for me. I think I just need to start, but I've been thinking about, let me back up. It's a little bit different subject matter than I usually tackle, but I really like the feeling of the scene. And so I've had this image for a while, and I do believe I attempted it one other time. It wasn't a total failure, but it didn't quite work out. That was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It's basically a landscape, a very simple landscape, but the shadows and, you know, the railroad lights and all this are just basically lines. So there's a lot of detail in here. So the question is, do I paint the landscape and then come on top with those structures, or do I paint those structures first and then paint the surrounding landscape and sky? I think the latter method that I just mentioned is what I'm going to go with, because that's what I usually do. Trying to paint in intricate patterns into wet paint usually doesn't work very well. So first thing will be to paint all these lines and these structures and get the values as close as possible. Or maybe I can scrub in the surrounding areas. Maybe I'll do that first. All right, there's a lot of brightness in the sky over here, so I think I'm gonna go with a wash of yellow. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, I'm gonna do this whole side over here. I'm gonna come over this with lately I've been coming over it with purple, like white with a bit of purple in it, because even though the sky, I mean, actually pink would work too, but that's what I'm going to do. And this sketch was done last night, and then once I got it, the sketch was fairly technical, so I let it dry just because, actually not on purpose, but just because I was too tired to go on. I'd done a bunch of other stuff during the day, building frames, etc. So I was kind of like, I didn't have the energy to go at a painting of this size and that required, all that focus. I was pretty much spent at the end of the day. So we'll get that in there. And then on the other side, I think I might go with, just for fun, I'm seeing hints of pink in the sky, maybe in the clouds, so I'm doing a little bit of permanent rose on this side underneath, under painting, and maybe blend the two together. It's not going to really matter because I'm going to go over it with color, but this will be these little bits of color poking through or peeking through the paint. I think will be really create extra luminosity. Actually, it's kind of nice that the sketch, the burnt sienna sketch, is dry, because as you can see, I can go over this, and I'm not losing that drawing. And that was just literally 12 hours ago, maybe. Not bad. So, kind of liking that effect. Sometimes when you do things, you make discoveries. Like I was just tired and wanted to go to bed. And actually, that's kind of cool. I kind of dig it. All right, maybe I'll keep with this theme here, doing these washes, really thin washes here. I can adjust the values later, and you know, apply thicker paint. But this is going to give me an idea of, obviously, of the layout. Also, it'll help me if I do come in with these, you know, these lights, having some paint on there already and some values to work with is going to give me an idea of how dark I want to paint this metal lattice work or whatever. Watch this painting end up being, like here I am, I'm like stressing about it. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And then I get started on it, watch it end up being not difficult at all. But I think then part of that is just that I've been thinking about it. Like I literally laid in bed and for like 15 minutes I was thinking, all right, what am I going to do? And then I came up with this idea of doing this like thin, you know, underpainting sort of approach. So again, if this does work out and it doesn't turn out to be that difficult of a process, I think, you know, all that time that I spent thinking about things actually paid off, and it was time well spent. And that's something I encourage in my plein air videos too, is just to make sure to really think out what you're doing, so you're not just relying on like formula, or even worse, you're just not even knowing what you're doing at all, which, believe me, we've all been there. You're just kind of, it really pays to think, basically, is what I'm saying. And come up with a plan. Another thing to remember is I'm going to probably be changing some of these colors. So this is kind of, like I said, this is an underpainting, just to get some paint onto the panel so I can start judging values. But there's going to be a lot of changing of, you know, tuning up of colors and everything. So having a variety of colors in the underpainting is actually is going to be a cool thing. It adds variety to the finished product. Also, having some paint on here, it actually it allows the subsequent layers of paint to go on much easier. So I'm not kind of fighting things. You know, I'm not, because you can tend to, if you're going onto a dry board or canvas for that matter, it can really be a challenge to get the paint down, because you know, the paint's absorbing in, and that's part of the reason why we do a scrub in, and that's the tradition in particular in like plein air painting, is to do, you know, a scrub in where you're scrubbing in color into the canvas, or in this case into the panel, and that allows you to not be working on an absolutely bone dry surface, and a super porous surface at that. So this, and as you can see, this process, it's not like it takes that long to do, you know what I mean? It's going on fairly quickly. I don't know how many minutes we're at here, but maybe 10 minutes or something? I don't know. It's not a lot of time. A little bit of greenery on this side of the tracks too. Maybe in here? I don't know. And it's already starting to shape up, looking like there's some light effect already going on. And of course, somebody just started some kind of like lawn care out here. This road, I don't know what color I'm going to do. There's I'm seeing some bluish hints in here. Again, doesn't really matter. Just getting something down to get the ball rolling. I can make adjustments to all of this And the more variety, in a lot of ways, the more variety I've got in the colors and the underpainting, the better. It's just going to add, it's going to make the finished product a much richer and more interesting paint surface. There's going to be, you know, a lot more going on as far as like little bits of color popping through. All of that adds a lot of interest to the finished product. Now, one thing I could do, I'm going to go onto this. Now there's a bright spot over here. I'm not sure how much of this reflective surface on the street that I'm going to keep. I'm not sure about that, but maybe I'll put it in just to begin with. There's some reflection up here too. The road going off into the distance is fairly warm in temperature. It doesn't matter. Again, I could change all of this. Now, as far as underneath, maybe. No, I don't know. I was going to say I could put like purple underneath, peeking through in the road, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to, maybe a little bit, like kind of a dirty yellow, and then I'll come on top of that with like a warmer yellow if need be. Actually, that color looks fairly accurate. That's another thing you can do is like once the painting is all blocked in, you can start looking and say, oh, this color's way out, but this color actually looks pretty good. And then you can start working, you know, building on the areas that actually are working and use those as a reference and then key the painting to the areas that work, if that makes sense. Yeah, having that drawing on and letting that sketch dry is proving to be really advantageous. To be able to kind of go over the whole thing. Now, one issue is my easel is not really set up to have such a large, wide panel on it, but I'm going to make do. Try to hold it so it doesn't annoy you guys, the viewers. Now, a lot of people have talked about like, oh, how, you know, I can't do wet on wet painting because every time I try to do a wet on wet painting, it just, everything turns to mud. And that's where this thin wash scrub-in business really comes into play. Okay, and that's why, like with Alla Prima or, you know, painters who do, you know, who paint plein air, which is basically, yeah, Alla Prima outdoors. A lot of times what's going to happen is you're going to put in, you're going to scrub in your first layer. And so just to give you an example, so if I was to mix up some thick paint, and I'm using a little bit of medium, that's 1 part oilless mineral spirits, 1 part stand oil, 2 parts linseed oil, but I'm keeping the paint thick. If I come on top, I can just paint right over this, no problem. You know, so if you're having trouble painting over, you know, wet on wet, it's because your first layer is, you know, is too thick. right, so that scrub in was pretty fast actually. And so the question now is, do I do these? I think I do. I think I do. I'm gonna work top to bottom. All right, so this area is the lightest area over here. I like how, you know, the sun is causing refraction among the metalwork here, so it's like it's darker along the bottom, and then there's almost areas where the lines disappear up here because of refraction, you know, the light bending around an object and kind of obscuring it. Honestly, this was the part that had me maybe the most nervous, is doing, no, that's not dark enough. That might be okay. I don't want the value of this to be too, I want this, you know, this sort of thing to be sort of delicately suggested in a way. And I want it to be, I want the brushwork to, you know, not be perfect. Like, I don't want to use a straight edge. I used a straight edge when I was, you know, mapping it out, like doing the composition, but I don't want that, I don't want to use it now. I want it kind of, I don't want it to be perfect. So I'm going to try not to use, a straight edge. I'm going to try to just work over these lines. And instead of doing full length lines, try to load the brush, make a mark, and I can adjust the colors of these later too. Oops, that's too dark. And the panel is still resisting the paint a little bit just because I don't have a lot, it's, yeah, I don't, there's not, because there's such a thin layer of paint there, the panel is still absorbent. The medium helps to apply the paint, it definitely does. You know, I'll come into these shapes as well, these lines, and I will adjust the value of the lines as well. And add some variety once I've got the thicker paint in the sky. And what I'll do is I'll come in with a, with probably this brush here, which is a number 4 synthetic, and I'm going to, so we want this one here, and I'm going to carve out around, you know, I'll use the negative space to carve out these shapes, these little pipe or metal work, whatever the heck it is. I don't even know. So yeah, this is a different style of painting for me. A lot of times, you know, like, I'm a subject matter driven painter for the most part. I like to, you know, I get inspired by certain, like the vibe of a certain place or a certain, you know, scene or something. And so I paint a lot of different subjects, and so there's a lot of kind of figuring out, and I don't get into any kind of formulaic approach. I would say with things that I've painted a lot, like for example cityscapes, I definitely have a method that I found that works, so I will stick with that, and I'm constantly building upon it. I mean, my latest cityscapes, the approach is different. It's constantly evolving. So I try not to get, you know, caught in any kind of rut. I want to constantly be pushing myself to, you know, to grow and try new things and you know, hopefully have my paintings improve, which is, you know, it seems to be, it's a real challenge the longer you've been painting. to have, you know, to continue to improve. It is tough. Okay, now this one is really straight. I'm going to use a straight edge on this, but when I do, I am not going to, let's see here. I'm going to try to do it in broken strokes, so I'm not making it look super perfect. And then when I come in with the sky, it's going to get messed up anyway, so there'll be back and forth going on with that. One thing about it being darker though, it kind of comes forward a little too much, so I'm going to have to adjust the value of that as well. Okay, so the lightest part in the painting is, I guess it's the sky, or it's the reflection of the sky in the road here. Both seem to be about the same in value. The question, okay, so I've done an underpainting in yellow, so that's going to give me sort of a luminous effect. What I want to do now is I'm going to come over this with white, and I've got to decide what I want to tint that white with. When I look at the image, it looks either pink or purple, so I'm going to experiment with both. It's very interesting to me that oftentimes the sky is like, you know, where it's the brightest, it's like a purplish color on the monitor. So that would be something like this. Oh, that's too dark. I'm having a feeling that pink is going to actually work. That's still too dark. Pink tends to be more luminous than, you know, like a light purple. But sometimes a light purple can actually look pink. But let's try adding let's add pink over the yellow. And the tint, you know, you've got to use very, very little. Okay, I think that looks better. My medium is a little bit thick right now because it's been out all night. There'll be some back and forth on these shapes, so I'm not concerned about getting them absolutely perfect. In fact, some of the blended, you know, some of these blended lines actually like that effect. Now remember, over here it's going towards blue, so not getting the full effect at this point. Leaving some of the little bits of yellow in there, I think is going to be nice. I'm not going to paint out all of it. This brush might be a little big for the job at hand here. And I like just little hints of the yellow. I don't want, it's a delicate balance. I don't want too much. Some of this blurring, you know, where the brush kind of goes over is okay. I can always come back and retouch things, and we'll definitely do that. And yeah, I'm actually liking that effect. The fact that there's some sort of blurred, you know, some lines here that are sort of blurred or whatever, and broken up too. These sort of lost and found lines, they call them. I think it really actually works because it suggests the refraction, the light passing, you know, from behind the object and then kind of wrapping around and obscuring certain bits of the metalwork. At the end, I can get in here with a fine brush if I want to and make whatever adjustments are necessary. But again, I want it to look sketchy. I don't want it to look like super careful, that's the tricky thing about a painting that has like a lot, you know, that has these sort of, you know, detail elements. It becomes difficult because I don't want to get fussy with it. I want it to still have a loose kind of feel to it, and yet the subject matter is one that almost requires a certain level of, you know, being careful and accuracy, whatever. So that's why I think this one had me a little bit nervous. It's a subject that might benefit from a more detailed or photorealistic approach, which is just not anything that I want to do necessarily. Not that I can't appreciate that in other paintings, I do, but it's not, my feeling was I want to do a subject like this, but approach it the way I approach paintings, with sort of a loose feel, you know, with visible brushwork, and therein lies the challenge. But I think we're getting there. I'm happy with that. Sky, the other thing, like with sky, if there's too much brushwork in the sky, sometimes it can draw too much attention to it, but I think we're going to be okay here. A lot of times too, the brushwork, it seems more visible when the paint, especially this is not super thick paint. For the sky, I don't want to go too thick because, you know, brushwork in the sky just draws attention to it, and it creates a look where it doesn't feel airy and open, which is obviously what we want. We want a feeling of space for our skies. We don't want it to feel like it's pasted on, like it's impermeable, like it's, you know, a barrier. I want it to feel open and airy. And I think that's pretty good. As I was saying, a lot of times the sky will feel, or the strokes in the sky, when you first paint it, you'll think, oh, it looks too, the brushwork is too visible. A lot of that will flatten out as the paint dries, so it's not going to seem as, the paint won't seem as, the strokes will not be as visible when the paint dries, usually. I mean, unless you're painting super thick impasto. I'm liking the values, actually. And I like this. And I like how this is all sort of, I like that area for now at least. Even though these aren't super round, I'm not going to get in there and, you know, round them off. Again, I want it to be sketchy looking. Alright, so the next step is moving over here with blue. Again, the values, I mean, it gets a little darker, but not much. I'm going to use phthalo blue over there. And it's funny, here I am doing a demo, and I'm experimenting on camera. So all the know-it-all painters will be out there saying, you shouldn't have done that. But I'm figuring this thing out bit by bit. The trick is going to be getting saturation in this blue here. I might come in a little heavy with the blue. I mean, one thing I could have done actually is I could have come with a phthalo wash, and then let's experiment with that. Let's see what that would be like. What if I put a phthalo wash on there? Now I've just made mud. But I'm gonna wash it. I'm gonna like scrub it off. And what if I had done like a phthalo blue underpainting? I'm gonna experiment with this. Just do a little area right here. Now I don't have to stay true to the original colors, and a lot of times what I'm doing is It's trial and error. If I'm not getting the effect I want, I'll just wipe it off and start over again. So nothing to fear. Just keep experimenting until you get what you're after. This is obviously too dark in value. Or is it? I don't know. It's not that bad, actually. The blend here is going to be interesting, because we'll have to figure out how to do that. Almost looks like there's some patches of almost like aqua in here. Again, these colors can be adjusted later, obviously. Constantly adjusting them is, coming over with white paint afterwards, especially after it starts to tack up a little bit. Well, it could be. Okay, that's not good. And I think the important thing to remember too is to get back from your panel or your canvas, so you can see how it's reading from a distance. So I'm going to need to do that. I'm going to try to leave some of these little bits of pink popping through. I like to have some transparency in the paint. And along the top of the mountain, it's kind of in the distance here, it's a lighter value. I might wait to add that after, at the end when this paint starts tacking up a little bit. It's still, but you look how I was able to go over those pink areas with this blue and then still get some pink coming through. It didn't turn into, purple. That's because that first layer was scrubbed in thin. Yeah, there seems to be too much of a division there between the two. I'm not really liking that. But again, let me get these other values in too. Let me get the mountains in there. Again, I could just wipe this out and have the whole sky kind of a pinkish color if I want. I just won't stop until it works. So that's just how it goes. Now, having this dark mountain along the back here is going to make the sky seem brighter. There's some warm areas on the mountains in the backgrounds, but I'm not going to put that in just yet. I'm just going to try to establish the values, appropriate values to keep that lighting effect. The key thing here is going to be that sky, making sure I get that sky to read properly. That does look better already. I mean, the values seem okay. It does seem to be lighter, over the mountains, like here. I want to make sure that I get that going. That sort of glow. Also, too, the shape of the mountains needs to be more irregular. It kind of tapers down over here. And, I'll come in and tune up the shapes of the mountains later. Again, right now I'm focusing on value mostly, just trying to get the values to feel right, so that I'm getting kind of a really nice lighting effect. The problem is getting saturation, but also getting a high value. Now, what I could do is I could darken this, but I don't really want to do that. So, kind of in a little bit of a situation here. All right, so I'm going to try lightning coming above on top of this with thicker, white paint with some phthalo in it to raise the value so that it kind of blends more with this here. All right, so I don't like, this just seems like too hard of a line here between the blue and this, you know, the blue and the pinkish on the values. You know, that it's too extreme of a value shift. So I am going to wipe it down a little bit. Again, I'm just doing whatever it takes to get the effect I'm after. No formula. And also too, I think that the process of actually experimenting and trying to figure out what's going to work, it all goes into contributing to an interesting painting at the end. You know, if you see some of the process in the finished product, if you see some of the struggle, to me that's more interesting, I think. I'm not going to be able to get that saturation. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to get that light value and saturated blue that I'm seeing in the image. I don't think that's going to happen. That's okay. Drastic measures. I'd rather get a feeling of light than color, than accurate color. So kind of trying anything here, trying stuff to make it work. I want that light, I want that airiness. See, this is why I was nervous about this. I knew this was going to be tough. I knew there was going to be challenges. And sometimes you can't sit and figure out exactly, you got to figure out the solutions. You're going to find the solutions in the process, not just sitting and thinking, but it does help. You know, it helps to have an idea of like what you want to do to approach the thing. All right, so this is as far as I got with the filming process, but let's take a look at the finished painting. What I ended up doing was I continued to lighten the sky, and then I added a bit of white with pink over to the left, so there wasn't that harsh transition between the light pink sky and the blue. Then I just came in like usual and just started adding thicker paint to the road and also the grass and to just about everywhere. Kind of did some fine tuning on the metal work. Did end up rounding out the lights a bit. And then spent a lot of time on the shadow that's on the street or on the road there. That took quite a bit of time. At first it was too straight across and it wasn't following the contours of the road, if that makes sense. Also darkened the tracks, put a little bit of glare over on the right on the tracks, you know, reflection. And then the tracks to the left, I put some blue, which was reflecting the bluer portion of the sky. And then, yeah, just some general cleanup. So I was happy with the final result of this painting, but to be honest with you, I was kind of surprised that it was the first to sell. And actually there were multiple inquiries about it as well. That's kind of reassuring because the thing that attracted me to this scene was just kind of that feeling of desolation, the strong shadow on the road. And as I mentioned, this was a subject that I've been looking at, or this, the source material I've been looking at for years and had attempted it one other time, probably 6 or 7 years ago, and it didn't work out. So I'm glad that I finally stuck with it and figured it out. But I will say that I continued, to go back to this painting over and over again over the course of 2 months, just making minor detail, just fixing minor things or whatever. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. And what else? If you want to help support this channel, you can hit the Patreon link down below. I've got a bunch of videos on there as well. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, you can buy a painting from Studio Gallery. The show continues, as I said, to November 2nd, and I'll put a link down below. Anyway, that's it. Stay creative, guys. I'll see you in the next video.